Welcome back, mathematicians. Today we're going to continue on with learning about how to find the volume of a rectangular prism using the formula. Just to refresh our memory, volume is the amount of space inside of a three-dimensional shape. We also talked about the formula for volume. Volume is equal to length times width times height. So let's go ahead and start today's lesson. So here I have this problem in front of you just to review, identifying where the length, width, and height is and calculating the volume. So the problem says, Carol buys a box in the shape of a rectangular prism. It has a length of 8 feet, a width of 5 feet, and a height of 3 feet. Let's go ahead and calculate what is the volume of this shape. So far in the problem, it tells us what the length is, what the width is, and what the height is. Let's go ahead and plug in those numbers. So the length is 8 feet. The width is 5 feet. And the height is 3 feet. Alright, so let's go ahead and write the formula. Volume is equal to length times width times height. And let's go ahead and calculate it. The length is 8, the width is 5, and the height is 3. Alright, 8 times 5, we know 8 times 5 is equal to 40. And then we can calculate 40 times 3. We know there's 1 power of 10 there, and then 4 times 3 is 12. So the volume is equal to 120 cubic feet, right? So that is the volume of Carol's box. Next, we're going to continue on to the next step. In today's model problem, the problem reads, Part A, prism B is shown below. The volume of prism C is 10 cubic inches greater than the volume of prism B. What is the volume of prism C? Show all your mathematical thinking. So let's just go back because there's a lot of terms and wording here that we really need to focus on. There are 3 things that you have to pay attention to. The first thing is prism B is the one shown below. So this here, this picture is showing prism B. That's important because the question is asking us for the volume of prism C. Prism C, we have to figure out. However, it gives us information about prism B, which we're going to need in order to figure out prism C. It also says the volume of prism C is 10 cubic inches greater than. So that means that whatever prism C is, the volume of prism C, it is 10 cubic inches greater than. That means it's going to be more than the volume of prism B. So we have to figure out, well, what is prism B? And then once we figure out prism B, we can figure out how much it would be for prism C. So let's go ahead and put in the dimensions for prism B, and then we'll calculate the volume of prism C. So we can see here before us, let's go ahead and find the length. Here you see the length, right, is 4 inches. So the length is 4 inches. The width, we can see here, there's 1, 2. So that's 2 inches. And then the height, we can calculate 1, 2, 3, 4. Is also 4 inches. So we see the length is 4 inches, the width is 2 inches, and the height is 4 inches. So let's go ahead and write down our formula. Volume equals length times width times height. And then we're going to plug in the dimensions for prism B into the formula. Now that we plugged in our dimensions into the formula, again, length is 4 times width is 2 times height, which is also 4. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the calculations for prism B and find the volume. So we know 4 times 2 equals 8. And then we could do 8 times 4, and that'll give us a volume of 32. 32 cubic inches. Now remember, this is not the volume of prism C. This is the volume of prism B. So we're going to just write a note to ourselves that this is the volume for prism B. Now that we know the volume of prism B is 32 cubic inches, we can use that information to figure out the volume of prism C. Now, remember back in the problem told us that prism C is 10 cubic inches greater. That's important. It's 10 cubic inches greater. So if I know it's 10 cubic inches greater, that means it's 10 cubes more. And if it's 10 cubes more, what operation are we going to do in order to figure that out? If you select adding, you're correct. I'm going to add 10 to 32, and that'll give me the 10 cubic inches more that I'm going to need in order to figure out prism C. So let's go ahead and add that together. So I'm going to add the volume of prism B, which is 32, and I'm going to add it to 10. All right, and then I could do 32 plus 10, and that gives me 42. And this is the volume of prism C. Now I'm going to go ahead and write my answer on the line. So the volume of prism C is 42 cubic inches. That is the volume of prism C. Now we're going to go on to part B. Part B says, what could be the length, width, and height of prism C? Going back to prism C, here is where prism C is. It says prism C is 42 cubic inches. That's the volume that we came up with, 42 cubic inches. So we want to figure out what are some possible length, width, height of prism C. This answer, there could be many answers for part B, but we're only going to choose one. So when we're coming up with dimensions, we want to come up with dimensions that are going to give us a product of 42 when we multiply the length, width, and height. So what are some possible dimensions that I can use to give me a volume of 42? So when you're doing this, you want to think about numbers that when you multiply them, you can get 42. So if I know my multiplication facts, I know 6 times 7 gives me 42. So I can have one example would be a 6 by 7 by 1, right? That could be one dimension, and I could do the calculation. 6 times 7 gives me 42, and then 42 times 1 gives me also 42. Okay, another set of dimension that I could possibly use, right, could be 3 times 2 times 7, right? 3 times 2 gives me 6, and then 6 times 7 gives me 42. So there are many answers that you can use and put into this particular problem. We could put in different dimensions, just as long as the volume gives us 42. So I'm going to go with the length of 3, a width of 2, and a height of 7. So So that could be my length, width, and height of prism C. And as we checked, it will give us a volume of 42 cubic inches. What are some other dimensions that you can come up with that'll give you a volume of 42? Now remember, try to come up with different dimensions than the ones I came up with. So I came up with a 3 by 2 by 7 and a 6 by 7 by 1. So come up with another set of dimensions that you can use that'll give you a volume of 42.